Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Daily News Roundup. Are you ready for today's headlines?
Always. Let's dive in.
Okay, first up, we're heading down to Venezuela. President Maduro is beginning his third term.
But, things aren't exactly peaceful down there.
You're right, the U.S. just offered a $25 million reward for information that leads to Maduro's arrest.
Citing drug trafficking and corruption charges.
And on top of that,
Yeah,
the UK, the EU, and Canada.
they've all imposed sanctions on Venezuelan officials condemning human rights violations.
And they're really questioning the legitimacy of Maduro's regime.
Exactly.
So it sounds like the international community is saying, not so fast, Maduro.
Yeah.
Speaking of not so fast, there's a major development in the 9/11 attacks case.
Against Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Yeah, he was finally about to plead guilty.
After more than 20 years.
Right.
In a deal that would have spared him the death penalty.
But a federal appeals court just paused the entire thing.
There's a dispute over the terms of the deal.
Can you imagine the frustration for the victims' families?
I mean, waiting for over 2 decades, only to face even more uncertainty.
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
Shifting gears now, the U.S. and the U.K. are really ramping up the pressure on Russia.
On their energy sector specifically.
Yeah, with new sanctions hitting over 200 entities and individuals.
It's a big move, all about draining Russia's resources.
And really trying to limit their ability to finance the war in Ukraine.
Right, but it's a risky move with potential impacts on global energy markets.
For sure, it's a delicate balancing act.
It really is.
Now, for a story a little closer to home, we've got some big companies like Meta and Amazon.
And they're rolling back their diversity programs.
Can you believe that?
It is a surprising shift after years of pushing for more diversity and inclusion.
What's behind this?
They're citing legal risks after that Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action in college admissions.
And there's growing pushback from conservative groups as well.
Exactly. It's creating a real debate about what the future holds for corporate diversity.
Definitely a complex issue with a lot to unpack. Okay, but on a lighter note, an Australian woman is trying to get her marriage annulled.
Oh, this one's a wild one.
It is.
Tell me more.
So it turns out her influencer partner staged this fake wedding for Instagram.
For the content, right?
Right, but it was actually legally binding.
Oh, no.
Can you imagine? So now she's trying to undo the whole thing?
Social media gone wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really shows how those lines can get blurred in the digital world.
Yeah, and the real-world consequences that can follow.
A good reminder to think before you post, that's for sure.
For sure.
Okay, let's take a step back in time now, about 30 years,
To 1994.
and look back at a moment when diplomacy really saved the world.
Ah, you're talking about Jimmy Carter's trip to North Korea?
Right. Back then, tensions were incredibly high.
With the threat of a nuclear showdown looming.
And Carter, at great personal risk, stepped in and negotiated a deal with Kim Il-sung.
A remarkable feat of diplomacy.
So what did this deal actually involve?
Well, Carter secured some major concessions. North Korea agreed to freeze their nuclear program.
Okay.
And in exchange,
Yeah.
they received economic aid and the promise of better relations with the U.S.
It really was a pivotal moment that helped to diffuse the crisis.
It's certainly changed the trajectory of U.S.-North Korea relations.
Absolutely. Fast forward to today, and another former U.S. president is making headlines.
Donald Trump.
Yeah. He just avoided prison time in his hush money case.
A truly unprecedented situation. The judge granted Trump an unconditional discharge.
Citing the unique circumstances of a convicted felon returning to the presidency.
It really raises questions about accountability and the limits of the legal system.
It definitely does. But Trump's back in the spotlight.
What's he up to now?
Well, he's reignited his interest in buying Greenland.
Oh, wow.
Denmark is calling it a provocation and is trying to carefully navigate this situation.
Rightly so.
But this also feeds into Greenland's own independence movement, which further complicates things.
This sure does.
Now, shifting focus to a more somber topic, new research suggests that the Palestinian death toll in the Gaza war could be much higher than official numbers.
The study was published in The Lancet, and it used statistical modeling.
To analyze data from various sources.
And they concluded that the death count could be underreported by a significant margin.
It raises serious concerns about the accuracy of the information and the true impact of the conflict.
Absolutely.
Okay, some good news now. A new mango-flavored pill is showing promise in the fight against intestinal worms.
A problem that affects billions worldwide.
This pill combines existing anti-parasitic drugs into a single, easy-to-take dose.
That's incredible.
Imagine the impact, especially for children in developing countries.
It's a potential game changer.
For sure. But we have to talk about a significant climate change milestone.
What's that?
For the first time ever, the global average temperature has exceeded that 1.5-degree sea warming limit.
Set by the Paris Agreement.
This really underscores the urgency of climate action.
And the potential for more frequent and intense extreme weather events.
Yeah, it's definitely a wake-up call.
It is.
But unfortunately, the bad news continues. The situation in Los Angeles is getting really scary.
I know. They're grappling with devastating wildfires.
And to make things even worse, a mistakenly issued evacuation alert sparked mass panic. Millions of residents were already on edge.
Wow. What went wrong with the alert system?
It seems like there was a glitch. They're investigating, but it raises concerns about the reliability of these systems, especially in times of crisis.
Yeah, clear communication is essential in those situations.
Absolutely. And here's another story that's causing some anxiety. Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank are feeling emboldened.
There's Trump back in the picture.
They're pushing harder for annexation, which is raising concerns about the future of the two-state solution.
It's a very sensitive issue with potential for escalation. The international community is watching very closely.
And on that note, we have to talk about the fate of TikTok in the U.S. It seems like its days might be numbered.
Yeah, the Supreme Court appears poised to uphold that ban on TikTok.
Unless its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, sells the platform.
This whole case centers around data security and national security concerns.
It's a high-stakes battle with implications for data privacy and censorship as well.
You're right. It's a case to watch for sure.
Definitely. But before we move on, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back with more news from around the world.
Sounds good. We're back with more news.
What else is happening around the world?
Okay, so this story is a chilling reminder about the darker side of the internet.
Okay, give it to me.
A Chinese actor was rescued from a scam center in Myanmar.
What?
It really sheds light on this whole world of cybercrime and human trafficking.
Oh, wow.
It's happening in that region.
That sounds terrifying. How did he end up in this situation?
It seems he was lured to Thailand with the promise of a fake acting job.
Really?
Instead of a film set.
Yeah.
He was kidnapped and then smuggled into Myanmar.
It's unbelievable what happened at the scam center.
Well, he was forced to participate in these online scams, essentially held prisoner and coerced into criminal activity.
Oh, wow.
These scam centers are a huge problem, and there are a lot of victims still trapped.
What led to his rescue?
His girlfriend,
Okay.
she took to social media,
Oh, wow.
posted about his disappearance on Weibo.
Uh,
Her post gained a lot of attention, caught the attention of the media and Chinese authorities.
okay.
And that public outcry really pressured officials to take action.
So social media can be a tool for good.
Absolutely.
Yep.
In this case, online platforms raised awareness and brought about real change.
It's a glimmer of hope amidst these dark stories. Back to the 9/11 case for a moment. The U.S. government is pushing back against these plea deals for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and other detainees.
Yeah. There are concerns that accepting these plea deals could set a dangerous precedent,
So what are they saying?
that it allows those accused of terrorism to avoid justice. And there's this belief that a public trial would offer more accountability and closure for the victims and their families.
But others argue that these plea deals might be the only way to hold them accountable. Why is that?
Well, there are legal complexities surrounding the case, especially the use of torture against Mohammed and other detainees.
Okay.
That tainted evidence could jeopardize any convictions in a traditional trial.
It's a real dilemma.
It is. With strong arguments on both sides, we'll have to see how the courts decide.
Shifting gears to Canada, looks like they could be headed for a political shakeup.
It does. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced he's stepping down, paving the way for a new election.
And Pierre, leader of the Conservative Party, is looking strong.
Yeah, he is.
So for those who aren't familiar with Canadian politics, tell me about Poilievre.
Well, he's a charismatic figure, but he's known for his conservative views, fiscally conservative, promising to reduce taxes and government spending.
Okay.
And he's been critical of Trudeau.
How do his views actually differ from Trudeau's? What kind of changes would his leadership bring?
He's a populist
Right.
who's tapped into public frustration, especially about the cost of living.
So is Canada taking a hard turn to the right?
It's possible. The Conservatives are doing well on the polls, and Poilievre knows how to mobilize his base.
Okay.
But, Canadian politics can be unpredictable, so it's a little early to say for sure.
It will be interesting to follow. Remember that chaotic evacuation alert in Los Angeles we were talking about earlier?
The one that sent millions scrambling.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't the only mishap with emergency systems recently.
Oh, really?
An emergency alert in Montana accidentally went out in Spanish.
What?
Can you imagine the confusion?
I can only imagine.
Thankfully, it seems nobody was harmed, but it definitely raised some eyebrows.
Rightfully so.
Huh.
It does make you think about the reliability of these systems, especially with what happened in LA.
It really highlights the importance of accuracy in these communications.
Especially when lives are at stake. It's a wake-up call for officials.
Absolutely. And, talking about situations where things can go really wrong.
Yeah.
Back to TikTok and its fate in the U.S. This case highlights the evolving world of these online platforms.
And content moderation.
The potential ban raises so many questions about data security, national security.
And the power of government to regulate online content.
It's a slippery slope for sure.
It is.
And the world is watching.
They are.
On a more somber note,
Okay.
there's been a concerning development in the Gaza conflict.
What's that?
A new study in The Lancet reveals potential underreporting of Palestinian deaths.
Oh no. What are they saying?
They used statistical modeling to analyze the data, and they estimate that the actual death toll could be much higher.
It raises concerns about transparency and the accuracy of information coming from the war zone.
Yeah, it does.
It's a reminder about the impact of this conflict.
It is on civilians.
Okay, let's switch gears to a positive story now. How about that?
I like that idea.
Dr. Angela Tiberi,
Okay.
also known as the Maths Queen.
I've heard of her.
She's not just breaking barriers in mathematics, but also advocating for girls in STEM.
She's amazing. She's the first African to win the big internet math-off.
Wow.
She's really using her platform to champion diversity and promote the potential of quantum science.
For Africa's future?
Yes.
That's incredible.
Her story is a true inspiration, showing the power of education and determination.
It is.
But before we wrap up, one more news item,
Oh,
and it's a big one. In the world of sports,
okay. I'm intrigued. What's happening?
the Indian cricket team is facing a crisis.
Really? They've been such a dominant force.
They have, but they've suffered a string of defeats lately.
Including?
A tough loss to Australia.
Okay.
Knocked them out of the World Test Championship final.
That's a big deal.
What's contributing to this decline?
Yeah.
It seems to be a few things. They're in a transition period with key players nearing retirement.
Yeah, I see.
And they're also struggling to integrate new players.
And their veterans aren't performing as well.
Right. So there are a lot of questions right now.
Yeah. Do experts think they'll bounce back?
Well, there's no shortage of talent, and they've overcome challenges in the past. But right now, they need to regroup, rebuild, and find their winning formula again.
It'll be interesting to see what they do.
It will. Okay, shifting to Venezuela now.
Yeah.
There's a story that sheds light on the human cost of political oppression there.
I know the one you mean.
The recently released activist,
Yes.
who's sharing his experience of brutality and torture in prison.
His testimony is a stark reminder of the ongoing human rights crisis.
Absolutely. He was imprisoned after protesting Maduro's re-election,
Right.
and he describes horrific conditions.
It's a story that needs to be heard. It shows the courage it takes to speak out against injustice.
Definitely. Okay, one final story before we conclude today.
Sounds good.
We're going back to Myanmar,
Okay.
where the realities of cybercrime and human trafficking are really hitting home.
I know what you mean.
It's not just the actor story anymore.
Right.
It's become this much larger systemic issue.
What's happening now?
There's been a surge in social media posts from families looking for loved ones
Okay.
who have disappeared under similar circumstances.
Wow. Are authorities doing anything?
There's definitely pressure on governments and law enforcement to act.
Right.
This public outcry, fueled by social media, is really shining a light on these atrocities.
It's a race against time to save those who are still trapped.
And it's clear that much more needs to be done to combat this issue.
You're right.
We're back for our final segment of the Daily News Roundup.
Ready to wrap things up.
Absolutely. What else is going on?
Well, we've been talking about the war in Ukraine and those sanctions on Russia's energy sector.
Yeah.
It seems like they're already having an impact.
Oh,
It's causing a lot of anxiety in Europe, especially Germany.
I can imagine.
There are worries about energy shortages this winter.
Yeah, especially as winter really sets in.
Germany is heavily reliant on Russian gas.
Right.
And these sanctions disrupt that supply chain.
So what are they doing about it?
They're scrambling to find alternative energy sources, but it's not easy.
I bet.
And they're urging people to conserve energy.
It's a tough situation.
It is. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Speaking of situations, this next story might sound familiar.
Okay.
Remember that Australian woman trying to annul her marriage after that staged Instagram wedding?
Yeah. The one where the influencer husband accidentally made their fake ceremony legally binding.
That's the one. Well, it seems like that's not the only social media prank gone wrong.
Really? What happened?
A group of teenagers in the U.S.,
Okay.
they're facing charges after a prank video of them stealing a car went viral.
Oh, no. What were they thinking?
It seems they thought it would be funny to film themselves stealing a car and posting it online.
For clout.
You got it. But the video caught the attention of the police,
Not surprising.
and they were arrested.
Wow. Talk about a backfire.
It's a harsh lesson about actions and consequences.
Absolutely. Both online and offline.
That's for sure. It's a good reminder to think about what we're putting online.
I agree. Well, that brings us to the end of today's Daily News Roundup.
It does. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for having me. And to all our listeners, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time for more news from around the world.